Hello and welcome to another episode of Arcs and Orcs, the podcast series from Sasha, Wallace. Today I am going to talk to you about some research that I've been doing with regard to human trafficking, and it's all started with sort of falling down the rabbit hole after finding this quote. A quote from Benjamin Franklin in his observations concerning the increase of mankind, written back in 1751, which is the 274 years ago now. A publication from Benjamin Franklin, who you may well be aware of as one of the founding fathers of the United States of America. Not actually a president, as many people might think, especially since his face appears on the $100 bill, which is the, we might hear about the $100 bill being referred to as a Benjamin or a Franklin. But actually he was so notable in his work as an inventor and a writer, and his contribution to society, to the economy 274 years ago and longer, that actually he became very well known, and one of his publications is where this quote comes from. And I'm going to read you the quote first, because actually this is the last quote or the last paragraph of this book, of this essay. It is number 24, or the 24th point of this essay, and the final point, which comes across as a call to action and a conclusion or a concluding statement to this article. So I'm going to read you the final quote first, and then I'm actually going to read you the whole paper, because I think that it would be important contextually to actually see how this conclusion or final statement is arrived at, and we can actually feel the full background of what he was talking about, and perhaps why, and what was happening at this time. And hopefully it will play into why I feel this is such an important and nay, horrifying piece of writing that would go on to inspire the nations of America in what was, to become their future. So number 24. This is Benjamin Franklin's own words, written in 1751 and published in 1755. Number 24. Which leads me to add one remark: that the number of purely white people in the world is proportionately very small. All of Africa is black or tawny. Asia chiefly tawny. America, exclusive of the newcomers, wholly so. And in Europe, the Spaniards, Italians, French, Russians and Swedes are generally of what we call a swarthy complexion, as are the Germans also, the Saxons only excepted, who, with the English, make the principal body of white people on the face of the earth. I wish that their numbers were increased. And while we are, as I may call it, scouring our planet by clearing America of woods, and so making this side of our globe reflect a brighter light to the eyes of inhabitants in Mars or Venus, why should we, in the sight of superior beings, darken its people? ? Why increase the sons of Africa by planting them in America, where we have so fair an opportunity, by excluding all blacks and tawnies, of increasing the lovely white and red? But perhaps I am partial to the complexion of my country, for such kind of partiality is natural to mankind. End quote. And end of essay. So I just want to give you a couple of definitions of those words in that last statement. So tawny, the word tawny is used to describe either a brown skin or a browny orange skin tone. So where they say all of Africa is black or tawny, this is tawny is considered brown or browny orange, and the use of the word swarthy is considered dark skin, a dark skin, and specifically though a skin that has been weathered by the elements as well. So I also wanted to highlight the fact that he refers to our people on the planet being visible to the inhabitants of Mars and Venus, a place which its inhabitants are considered superior beings, and its people, these superior beings of Mars and Venus, actually being the people of Earth as well. We will get to this perhaps in a later episode, but I just wanted to note that. So this is the last concluding statement, or 24th point of an essay from Benjamin Franklin. So let's go back to the beginning, and I'm going to read you the entire piece, which actually, as I've been reading it, at times doesn't seem to make very much sense. The last statements in this actually seem to be very, very clear on what he is commenting on, what he is promoting. But let's go back to sort of understand where his initial founding arguments or statements are. And I'm going to read you the entire essay, which, as I said, is called Observations Concerning the Increase of Mankind, written in 1751 by Benjamin Franklin, one of the founding fathers of the US of A, printed in William Clarke, Observations on the Late and Present Conduct of the French, with regard to their encroachments upon the British Colonies in North America, to which is added, wrote by another hand, Observations Concerning the Increase of Mankind and the Peopling of Countries, and Boston, printed and sold by S. Kneeland in Queen Street, Boston, Yale University Library, 1755. And this is the first paragraph, or the introduction. The immediate occasion for writing this essay, according to Van Doren, actually, I'm going to start again, because I'm not going to read you the individual numbers in the introduction. I'm only going to start reading numbers when I get to the points (1 to 24). The immediate occasion for writing this essay, according to Van Doren, was the British Iron Act of 1750, which prohibited the erection of additional slitting and rolling mills, plating forges, and steel furnaces in the American colonies. While English ironmasters rejoiced in the protection the law afforded them, a few far-sighted Britons and most Americans appreciated that the act would curb colonial growth at just the moment when Britain and France were engaged in a climactic struggle for possession of North America. Franklin wrote the essay in 1751. In the following spring, he sent a copy to Peter Collinson and Richard Jackson, who were greatly entertained by it, and Jackson eventually sent Franklin a full criticism of it. Collinson hoped it would be published. "I don't find anyone has hit it off so well," in quotes. And Dr. John Perkins of Boston, who also received a copy, judged it such an informing piece that it should be read and well considered by every Englishman who wishes well to his country. Not until late in 1754, however, did Franklin consent to its publication. It appeared the next year as an appendix to William Clarke's Observations. The pamphlet, including Franklin's essay, was reprinted at once in London, and the essay alone, with some excisions, appeared in the Gentleman's Magazine for November 1755 and the Scots Magazine for April 1756. In the years 1760 and 1761, it was printed, also with excisions, as an appendix to London, Dublin, Boston, and Philadelphia editions of Franklin's Interest of Great Britain Considered, and it was reprinted in part in the London Chronicle, May 20, 1760. Franklin included it in the fourth edition of his Experiments and Observations on Electricity, 1769. Thus, Franklin's ideas on the growth of population entered the current of English economic thought. They had a demonstrable influence on Thomas Malthus, who quoted Franklin approvingly and accepted his surprisingly accurate estimate of the rate of population increase in America, and on Francis Place, who studied these and others of Franklin's ideas on population. Adam Smith is known to have had 2 copies of this essay in his library. And now we actually get to the essay itself. Observations concerning the increase of mankind, peopling of countries, etc. Number 1. Tables of the proportion of marriages to births, of deaths to births, of marriages to the numbers of inhabitants, formed on observations made upon the bills of mortality, christenings, and of populous cities, will not suit countries, nor will tables formed on observations made on full settled old countries, as Europe, suit new countries, as America. Number 2. For people increase in proportion to the number of marriages, and that is greater in proportion to the ease and convenience of supporting a family. When families can be easily supported, more people marry, and earlier in life. Number 3. In cities where all trades, occupations, and offices are full, Many delay marrying till they can see how to bear the charges of a family, which charges are greater in cities as luxury is more common. Many live single during life and continue servants to families, journeymen to trades, and hence cities do not by natural generation supply themselves with inhabitants. The deaths are more than the births. Number 4. In countries full settled, the case must nearly be the same, all lands being occupied and improved to the height, or height, with an H at the end. Those who cannot get land must labour for others who have it. When labourers are plenty, their wages will be low. By low wages, a family is supported with difficulty. This difficulty deters many from marriage, who therefore long constitute or long continue servants and single. Or that might be taken as they remain servants and stay single for a long time. Only as the cities take supplies of people from the country and therefore thereby make a little more room in the country, marriage is a little more encouraged there, and the births exceed the deaths. Number 5. Europe is generally full settled with husbandmen, manufacturers, and therefore cannot now much increase in people. America is chiefly occupied by Indians, who subsist mostly by hunting. But as the hunter, of all men, requires the greatest quantity of land from whence to draw his subsistence, the husbandman subsisting on much less, the gardener on still less, and the manufacturer requiring least of all, the Europeans found America as fully settled as it well could be by hunters, yet these, having large tracts, were easily prevailed on to part with the portions of territory to the newcomers, who did not much interfere with the natives in hunting, and furnished them with many things that they wanted. Number 6. Land being thus plenty in America, and so cheap as that a labouring man that understands husbandry can in a short time save money enough to purchase a piece of new land sufficient for a plantation, whereon he may subsist a family. Such are not afraid to marry, for if they even look far enough forward to consider how their children, when grown up, are to be provided for, they see that more land is to be held at rates equally easy, all circumstances considered. And I'll just add a sidebar here. As you can probably tell, this is really complex, the way that it's been written. And I'm trying my best to read it so that it makes sense. It doesn't make good sense, it just might make grammatical or sense or easy listening on the ear. The content itself is fairly unsettling, as I'm sure you're starting to understand. I'm going to go back and just give you a quick overview of point 5, because I think there's something very interesting here. So America at this point in time, in 1751, is chiefly occupied by Indians or Native Americans, who subsist mostly by hunting, and they own or care for the greatest quantity of land. They are considered mostly hunters of animals, and they own or care for these large tracts of land, and were easily prevailed upon to part with portions of their territory to the newcomers. So to say easily prevailed, when you look at the definition of prevailed, that means they were convinced or forced to give over or give up or relinquish something that they didn't actually want to give up. So they were easily prevailed upon to part with their land, even though they didn't want to. And I just wanted to explain that very interesting use of the word prevailed there, because it looks like they just handed over their land, but they didn't, and they weren't paid for it. They were, it was stolen from them. So number 7. Hence, marriages in America are more general and more general early than in Europe. And if it is reckoned there that there is but one marriage per annum among 100 persons, perhaps we may here reckon 2. And if in Europe they have but 4 births to a marriage, many of their marriages being late, we may here reckon 8, of which if 1/2 grow up, and if marriages are made, reckoning one with another at 20 years of age, our people must at least be doubled every 20 years. Number 8. But notwithstanding this increase, so vast is the territory of North America that it will require many ages to settle it fully. Until it is fully settled, labour will never be cheap here. Where no man continues long a labourer for others, but gets a plantation of his own, no man continues long a journeyman to a trade, but goes among those other new settlers and sets up for himself. Hence, labour is no cheaper now in Pennsylvania than it was 30 years ago, though so many thousand labouring people have been imported. Number 9. The danger, therefore, of these colonies interfering with their mother country in trades that depend on labour and manufacturing, etc., is too remote to require the attention of Great Britain. Number 10. But in proportion to the increase of the colonies, a vast demand is growing for British manufactures, a glorious market wholly in the power of Britain, in which foreigners cannot interfere, which will increase in a short time even beyond here power of supplying, though her whole trade should be to her colonies. Therefore Britain should not too much restrain manufacturing or manufactures in her colonies. A wise and good mother will not do it. To distress is to weaken, and weakening the children weakens the whole family. Number 11. Besides, if the manufactures of Britain, by reason of the American demands, should rise too high in price, foreigners who can sell cheaper will drive her merchants out of foreign markets. Foreign manufactures will thereby be encouraged and increased, and consequently foreign nations, perhaps her rivals in power, grow more populous and more powerful, while her own colonies, kept too low, are unable to assist her or add to her strength. Number 12. 'Tis an ill-grounded opinion that by the labour of slaves America may possibly vie in cheapness of manufactures with Britain. The labour of slaves can never be so cheap here as the labour of working men is in Britain. Any one may compute it. Interest of money is in the colonies from 6 to 10%. Slaves, one with another, cost £30 sterling per head. Reckon then the interest of the first purchase of a slave, the insurance or risk on his life, his clothing and diet, expenses in his sickness and loss of time, loss by his neglect of business. Neglect is natural to the man who is not to be benefited by his own care or diligence. Expense of a driver to keep him at work, and his pilfering from time to time. Almost every slave being by nature a thief, and compare the whole amount with the wages of a manufacturer of iron or wool in England, you will see that labour is much cheaper there than it ever can be by Negroes here. Why then will Americans purchase slaves? ? Because slaves may be kept as long as a man pleases, or has occasion for their labour, while hired men are continually leaving their master, often in the midst of his business, and setting up for himself or themselves. 13. As the increase of people depends on the encouragement of marriages, the following things must diminish a nation. This is 13.1. 13.1. The being conquered, for the conquerors will engross as many offices, and exact as much tribute or profit on the labour of the conquered, as will maintain them in their new establishment. And this diminishing the subsistence of the natives discourages their marriages, and so gradually diminishes them, while the foreigners increase. 13.2. Loss of territory. Thus the Britons, being driven into Wales and crowded together in a barren country, insufficient to support such great numbers, diminished till the people bore a proportion to the produce, while the Saxons increased on their abandoned lands till the island became full of English. And were the English now driven into Wales by some foreign nation, there would in a few years be no more Englishmen in Britain than there are now people in Wales. 13.3. Loss of trade. Manufactures exported draw subsistence from foreign countries for numbers, who are thereby enabled to marry and raise families. If the nation be deprived of any branch of trade, and no new employment is found for the people occupied in that branch, it will also be soon deprived of so many people. 13.4. Loss of food. Suppose a nation has a fishery, which not only employs great numbers, but makes the food and subsistence of the people cheaper. If another great nation becomes master of the seas and prevents the fishery, the people will diminish in proportion as the loss of employ and dearness of provision makes it more difficult to subsist a family. 13.5. Bad government and insecure property. People not only leave such a country and settling abroad incorporate with other nations, lose their native language and become foreigners, but the industry of those that remain being discouraged, the quantity of subsistence in the country is lessened, and the support of a family becomes more difficult. So heavy taxes tend to diminish a people. 13.6. The introduction of slaves. The Negroes brought into the English sugar islands have greatly diminished the whites there. The poor are by this means deprived of employment, while a few families acquire vast estates, which they spend on foreign luxuries, and educating their children in the habit of those luxuries. The same income is needed for the support of one that might have maintained 100. I'll read that again. The same income is needed for the support of one that might have maintained 100. The whites who have slaves are not labouring, are enfeebled, and therefore not so generally prolific. The slaves being worked too hard and ill-fed, their constitutions are broken, and the deaths among them are more than the births, so that a continual supply is needed from Africa. The northern colonies, having few slaves, increase in whites. Slaves also perdurate the families that use them. The white children become proud, disgusted with labour, and being educated in idleness, are rendered unfit to get a living by industry. Point 14. Hence, the prince that acquires the new territory, if he finds it vacant, or removes the natives to give his own people room, the legislator that makes effectual laws for promoting of trade, increasing employment, improving land by more or better tillage, providing more food by fisheries, securing property, etc., and the man that invents new trades, arts, or manufactures, or new improvements in husbandry, may be properly called fathers of their nation, as they are the cause of the generation of multitudes by the encouragement they afford to marriage. 15. As to privileges granted to the married, such as the jus trium liberorum among the Romans, they may hasten the filling of a country that has been thinned by war or pestilence, or that has otherwise vacant territory, but cannot increase a people beyond the means provided for their subsistence. Number 16. Foreign luxuries and needless manufactures imported and used in a nation do, by the same reasoning, increase the people of the nation that furnishes them, and diminish the people of the nation that use them. Laws, therefore, that prevent such importations, and on the contrary promote the exportation of manufactures to be consumed in foreign countries, may be called, with respect to the people that make them, generative laws, as by increasing subsistence they encourage marriage. Such laws likewise strengthen a country, doubly by increasing its own people and diminishing its neighbours. 17. Some European nations prudently refused to consume the manufactures of East India. They should likewise forbid them to their colonies, for the gain to the merchant is not to be compared with the loss by this means of people to the nation. Number 18. Home luxury in the great increases the nation's manufacturers employed by it, who are many, and only tends to diminish the families that indulge in it, who are few. The greater the common fashionable expense of any rank of people, the more cautious they are of marriage. Therefore, luxury should never be suffered to become common. Number 19. The great increase of offspring in particular families is not always owing to greater fecundity of nature, but sometimes to examples of industry in the heads and industrious education, by which the children are enabled to provide better for themselves, and their marrying early is encouraged from the prospect of good subsistence. Number 20. If there be a sect, therefore, in our nation that regard frugality and industry as religious duties, and educate their children therein more than others commonly do, each sect must consequently increase more by natural generation than any other sect in Britain. 21. The importation of foreigners into a country that has as many inhabitants as the present employments and provisions for subsistence will bear, will be in the end no increase of people, unless the newcomers have more industry and frugality than the natives, and then they will provide more subsistence and increase in the country. But they will gradually eat the natives out. Nor is it necessary to bring in foreigners to fill up any occasional vacancy in a country, for such vacancy, if the laws are good, will soon be filled by natural generation. Who can now find the vacancy made in Sweden, France, or other warlike nations by the plague of heroism 40 years ago, in France by the expulsion of the Protestants, in England by the settlement of her colonies, or in Guinea by 100 years of exportation of slaves that has blackened half of America? The thinness of inhabitants in Spain is owing to national pride and idleness, and other causes, rather than to the expulsion of the Moors, or to the making of new settlements. 22. There is, in short, no bound to the prolific nature of plants or animals, but what is made by their crowding and interfering with each other means of subsistence. Was the face of the earth vacant of other plants, it might be gradually sowed and overspread with one kind only, as, for instance, with fennel, and were it empty of other inhabitants, it might in a few ages be replenished from one nation only, as for instance with Englishmen. Thus there are supposed to be now upwards of 1 million English souls in North America, though 'tis thought scarce 80,000 have been brought oversea. And yet perhaps there is not one the fewer in Britain, but rather many more, on account of the employment the colonies afford to manufactures at home. This million doubling, suppose but once in 25 years, will in another century be more than the people of England, and the greatest number of Englishmen will be on this side of the water. What an accession to power to the British Empire by sea as well as land. What increase of trade and navigation. What numbers of ships and seamen. We have been here but little more than 100 years, and yet the force of our privateers in the late war, united, was greater both in men and guns than that of the whole British Navy in Queen Elizabeth's time. How important an affair then to Britain is the present treaty for settling the bounds between her colonies and the French, and how careful she should be to secure room enough, since on the room depends so much the increase of her people. 23. In fine, or in finality, a nation well regulated is like a polypus. Take away a limb, its place is soon supplied. Cut it in two, and each deficient part shall speedily grow out of the part remaining. Thus, if you have room and subsistence enough, as you may by dividing make 10 polyps out of one, you may make of one 10 nations, equally populous and powerful, or rather increase a nation tenfold in numbers and strength. And since detachments of English from Britain sent to America will have their places at home so soon supplied and increase so largely there, why should the Palatine Boers be suffered to swarm into our settlements, and by herding together establish their language and manners to the exclusion of ours? Question mark. Why should Pennsylvania, founded by the English, become a colony of aliens who will shortly be so numerous as to Germanize us instead of our Anglifying them, and will never adopt our language or customs any more than they can acquire our complexion? 24. Which leads me to add one remark, that the number of purely white people in the world is proportionately very small. All of Africa is black or tawny. Asia chiefly tawny. America, exclusive of the newcomers, is wholly so. And in Europe, the Spaniards, Italians, French, Russians and Swedes are generally of what we call a swarthy complexion, as are the Germans also, the Saxons only excepted, who with the English make the principal body of white people on the face of the earth. I could wish their numbers were increased, and while we are, as I may call it, scouring our planet by clearing America of woods, and so making this side of our globe reflect a brighter light to the eyes of the inhabitants in Mars or Venus, why should we, in the sight of superior beings, darken its people? Why increase the sons of Africa by planting them in America, where we have so fair an opportunity, by excluding all blacks and tawnies, of increasing the lovely white and red. But perhaps I am partial to the complexion of my country, for such kind of partiality is natural to mankind. End of essay by Benjamin Franklin, as part of the Franklin Papers. I will return, maybe in this podcast after a short interval, maybe in a separate episode, with further rabbit warrens and rabbit caverns that I fell into beyond this rabbit hole. And I will close off this section by saying thank you for listening to this episode of the Arcs and Orcs podcast by Sasha Wallace. Today's date is the 2nd of February 2025.